Welcome, Dolphins fans, haters, and everyone in between to your favorite show discussing the greatest franchise in sports, the Miami Dolphins. This is the PhinsPod. My name is Moose, your host, and it's time to push the agenda, the Tua agenda. Our quarterback has taken a leap this season unlike any seen before in NFL history, and that's not hyperbole, it's facts. No, he doesn't play with the same wow factor, right, that you see from the likes of Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes. But when you take a hard look at the numbers, turn on the tape, one thing becomes evidently clear. Tua Tagovailoa is an elite quarterback in the NFL, right? That combination of accuracy, touch, anticipation, and pocket presence make him a viable top 5 quarterback for years to come. And if you've had your reservations, I understand. We've been at the mercy of mediocrity for far too long. Exhibit A, Ryan Tannehill. Exhibits B through Z, every other quarterback since Dan Marino. But now is the time. Join the right side of history. So in this episode, not only are we going to be detailing exactly why Tua is having a season which will launch him into the elite status of this league, we'll also make the case for why he's going to wind up winning the 2022 NFL MVP. This is going to be a fun one, and to be frank, not an episode I thought I'd be making for a long, long time. But here we are, so let's dive in. Let's take a quick walk through history. And no, we don't have to go back years, barely, honestly, even a few months. The narrative surrounding number one was simple. This season was his make-or-break year in the National Football League. After what many consider to be mediocre rookie and sophomore campaigns, most critics felt as if they had all the info that they needed on Tua. Simply put, he was too small, weak-armed, injury-prone. You couldn't build a team around him, not to mention that solid win-loss record that Dolphins fans kept bringing up. That was due to a dominant defense. The winning quotient that he seemed to possess, it was more about luck and game management rather than anything he himself was capable of. And after all, Brian Flores, a coach who many thought was one of the brightest young head coaches in the league, he didn't believe in him. So why should you? Do you think you know more about offensive football than Brian Flores, the man who witnessed Tom Brady on a daily basis? People felt like at Tua's best, he could be like Alex Smith or, if we got lucky, Jimmy Garoppolo. And then once the Dolphins acquired Tyreek Hill, the pressure became even more palpable. How could, right, the best deep ball threat the league had seen over the last decade or two work with a weak-armed quarterback, noodle-armed Tua, who was scared to throw it deep? Little did they know what us football-minded individuals knew. Screw your hot takes. Tua had all the tools to be successful. The reasons for his limitations over the last 2 seasons have been documented extensively on this channel. But just to reiterate why this season is not as shocking as many think, firstly, and perhaps the most obvious issue when you think back, his injury. Tua sustained a potentially career-ending injury at the end of his college career at Bama. It's the same hip injury which ended the career of legend Bo Jackson. So getting his strength back wouldn't have happened in a matter of months. Tua needed years to regain hip flexion, torque, mobility, and then confidence in his lower body. And as a result, you did see a smaller, more fragile guy playing the position when he entered the league. Yet, despite the fact that he was likely thrown into the starting position too early, he was still finding success. Yeah, he was managing the game, but just ask a Jets fan. That is not as easy as it seems. Making the right read, playing within the offense, throwing with accuracy, these are things which plenty of talented young bucks don't have. Tua did. So when you consider that even as a rookie, still coming back from a brutal injury, Tua was able to lead his team to victory on a pretty consistent basis, it shouldn't surprise you that he's doing it even more impressively now that he has talent around him. The other reason Tua's success was stunted was the roster around him. In his first 2 seasons, Miami's offense did not have any legitimate playmakers. Myles Gaskin, Devontae Parker, Isaiah Ford, Lynn Bowden Jr., right? All guys I respect for what they gave the Fins, but not starting caliber weapons in a successful NFL offense. I mean, Devontae Parker, just look at the Patriots. The Dolphins, and more so the NFL world, wanted to see Tua light it up with guys like this, consistently comparing him to Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow. But Tua didn't have guys like they did. Tua didn't have Austin Eckler, Joe Mixon, Tyler Boyd, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Hunter Henry, not to mention his offensive line. We all know the horrifying reality of that situation. Unfortunately, there's multiple episodes on this channel about how bad the Dolphins offensive line has been. Historically bad. Constantly being under duress. Still coming back physically healthy. Get healthy again. And no talent around you. What quarterback in this league is going to thrive in those conditions? Hell, the anointed one, Justin Herbert, he's dealing with that right now. And take a look at his numbers. And the final reason that people fail to see Tua Tagovailoa's true potential, Brian Flores. And we're not going to get too deep into this, but it's just the truth. For as good of a defensive coach that Brian Flores was, how creative he was on that side of the ball, how aggressive, the man lacked vision. And that comes as no surprise when you consider no true Belichick disciple has had success once they leave Tom Brady. Just look at Josh McDaniels this season. Even Bill himself is seeing the reality of having mid-quarterback play. It isn't so pretty. Being in that cocoon of New England for so long, Flores did not have the connections to call upon a legitimate offensive mind to help his young quarterback out. And as a result, Tua was stuck in a non-creative scheme on top of all the other difficulties he was dealing with. So that's the reason for his diluted numbers over the last 2 seasons. But that doesn't really explain the vitriol. Why does such a nice kid with so much talent on film get treated the way that he did? The benchings. Oh my God, the benchings. Brian Flores sat Tua twice in his rookie season. Once in his first ever career loss in Denver, and then again in Vegas. Rather than allowing his young signal caller to go through these growing pains, rather than letting his rookie quarterback learn how to play in tough conditions, he sat him down. This cultivated a narrative that he still hasn't really shaken. So when you combine all these factors, you get to his first 2 seasons in the NFL. A lot of distractions, plenty of reasons to fail, throw in Deshaun Watson rumors, and frankly, it's a miracle that he's able to play with so much confidence. But there was someone in the building who was able to see through all this bullcrap. Someone who knew the potential within number one. The same man who drafted him despite that head coach we talked about wanting someone else. Christopher Grier. Grier selected Tua knowing the potential that what we're seeing now was always there. So rather than jump ship, like many in the NFL world were telling him to do, hell, even fans of his own team, he doubled down. And thank the good Lord he did. First, he went out and got a coach who knew offense. A coach who could scheme guys open, help simplify the game for Tua and those around him, and most importantly, reinstill that confidence and swagger Uno once had. Then he went to work. Chris Grier built a roster which would accentuate Tua's skill set. You know what pairs best with speed? Not, sidearm throws, arm strength, but accuracy, precision. Tyreek Hill paired him up with Jalen Waddle, Raheem Mostert, add him in the backfield, and then, of course, protection with Pro Bowler Teron Armstead and, honestly, great Pro Bowl season by Connor Williams. The pieces that would lead to Tua's success ultimately this season. And here we are. After 7 full starts, Tua is playing like one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And the fact that we're even having this discussion is frankly, it's kind of mind-blowing. It's time to talk about why Tua Tagovailoa should be the NFL MVP at this point in the season. Obviously, we're just over halfway through the regular season, but this is when the contenders for that title start narrowing down. From a statistical standpoint, the evidence is there. Tua leads the league in passer rating at 118.4. The rest of the top 5 include guys like Mahomes, Burrow, Geno Smith, and Jalen Hurts, but not one of them is within 10 points. And I know that we've been hearing a lot about this passer rating stat lately, and people tend to wave it off, assuming it's some dumb analytics stat that's used to prop up certain players and certain narratives, but not really. Passer rating is calculated using 5 variables: passing attempts, completions, passing yards, touchdown passes, and interceptions. each of those are pretty basic facets of playing the position. So when you're the best at those basic facets, by a pretty significant margin, I think you're having a pretty damn good season. In games where Tua has appeared in, he's racked up 2,265 yards halfway through, a 71% completion percentage, 18 touchdowns. He missed 3, by the way, 3 games, and just 3 picks, 2 of which happened in the same game against the Ravens, in a situation where Miami was trailing big and Tua was trying to force the ball in there. Now, when you do get into those more nuanced stats, those that kind of fall into the next-gen nerd metrics, Tua looks even better. He leads the league in EPA, expected points added. 7.3% of his completions result in touchdowns. League leading. Oh, and that weak arm narrative? He leads the NFL in yards per attempt and yards per completion. The other thing to consider is how and when he's getting these stats. It's not like Miami's a mediocre team and he's racking all this up in garbage time. No, the Dolphins are winning games, tough games. And he's been put in pressure situations as well. The Ravens game, the Bills game, and most recently, the Lions. I know the Lions are a bad team, but Tua's defense was not helping him out. And he's come through time and time again. So he is more than qualified to be the MVP when you just look at the numbers. But why should he deserve it over the best player in the league, Patrick Mahomes? Simple. The name of the award itself, MVP, most valuable player. We have seen what happens to this team when Tua Tagovailoa is not out there. We lose. In the 3 games Tua did not finish or start, Miami lost. The same weapons on the outside, the same coach, but all else. So there's clear value to him being on the field. Further, that nerdy stat that we mentioned, EPA, expected points added, that calculates the efficiency and effectiveness of a player. Tua leads the league. So numerically speaking, he's leading the league in value over Patrick Mahomes. That's pretty convincing, if I say so myself. And the last thing that matters is the eye test. And that is where Tua lags behind. Not his fault. He doesn't make those circus throws we see from Mahomes. He's not delivering that 40-yard pass on a rope, running backwards, throwing it behind his back. But last time I checked, winning games doesn't require that. And he's winning them at an elite clip. For me, Tua is passing the eye test with flying colors because when he's out there this season, he seems in control. He's taking command of the scheme. He's directing the entire unit with precision and confidence. And I think that's the problem here. People are not recognizing the confidence that he's playing with. They seem to think that the receivers are just magically uncovered. The windows he's throwing into are a result of luck, bad defense, or, frankly, Mike McDaniel. They're more willing to say the Dolphins have the next Sean McVay before they're saying, damn, Tua might be a good quarterback. If that doesn't tell you how take-invested people are these days. Because Mike McDaniel hasn't really proven anything yet. Tua's been in the league, and I know people say he hasn't proven anything yet, but he has film, and the things he's doing aren't brand new. He's just doing them at a higher level. And of course, luck, bad defense, Mike McDaniel himself, they play a role, but you have to believe in your ability to make the throws on a consistent basis in order to fire them in there time and time again, and Tua's doing that. I think you're starting to see this narrative shift. People are beginning to recognize that they can no longer sit there with a straight face and say Tua's mediocre to honestly bad. The biggest haters will have to admit he's having a good season, but they're going to say it's due to what's around him. Those who aren't blinded from their previous opinions are openly admitting they blew it. Tua has the ability they didn't believe. Well, for some, it takes seeing to believe it, and that's what's happening. We're seeing it. They're all seeing it. In order for Tua to finish the season with the award, he needs to close out strong, of course. He can't start slipping up in these games, and if he does, the haters come back. And the argument that this success is purely a product of his environment, it starts to gain traction. Here's the thing. I don't think it's a fluke. I don't believe that. I think this is the player that we're going to see from here on out. Why? Because of the flashes we saw over the last 2 seasons. If you were paying attention, we detailed that mess he was a part of. And now, free from all those constraints, with some protection, he can be himself, play like himself. Knowing we have the Houston Texans coming up, before that tough stretch, it's comforting, right? Ease back in after the bye, help pad those stats for the MVP. We'll be getting into the remainder of the season, right? Playoff expectations and, hey, division title hopes. We'll talk about that in a coming episode. But for now, I feel like this needed to be said. Tua is playing at an elite level. For those who doubted, it's just time to face facts. It's okay to admit that your team, if you're a Dolphins fan, has the guy. Some of us were trying to tell you the whole time, but I'm glad he's made it obvious enough with his play. The final narrative he needs to bust right through is cold weather. The way he plays in those elements, poor conditions, rain, snow. He must prove that he can play at this level, win games when the elements are not on his side. And I believe he can do it. He's given us no reason to doubt it. And with the help of a solid running game, he very well could. What do you think of Tagovailoa's play? Is it sustainable? Is he the MVP in your opinion? Or has this just been a product of his weapons and poor opponents? Is Tyreek Hill a bigger threat to the MVP than Tua is when it comes to Mahomes? Or do you think we're seeing the real guy who was supposed to be taken 5th overall? The guy who led his team as a freshman to a title? Let us know in the comments below. And before we do go, I want to give a quick shout out to one of our patrons over on Patreon, Timothy Ritchie. Not only is he a badass Dolphins fan and amazing member of this community, you'll see him in the comments all the time, he wrote and co-produced his very own film. It's called Wolfhound, a World War II movie based on real events. It's available on Amazon, Apple TV, as well as for free on Tubi if you're being cheap, but honestly, go buy it. Buy it. I'm checking it out this weekend and hope all of you do so alongside with me. Congrats, Timothy, and keep on being awesome. I mean, he's been a believer in Tua from the start, so we already knew he was awesome, but check out his work. Links to that will be in the description. Again, it's called Wolfhound, and one of our very own is the brains behind it. Go give him some love. Fins up, baby. Fins up.
I am fantastically in on Tua on this one by far. Look, you want expectations? I just pulled up the preseason MVP odds. It's Josh Allen, it's Mahomes, it's Herbert, Brady, Rodgers, Russell Wilson.
Does Tua even make the list?
He's not on the list, Peter.
How about 50 people? He's not
on the list. I'm seeing Kyler Murray on here, Russell Wilson. He's not. No one would even put him on the list. And he might win this thing. Like, these guys have been great and good stories and expectations. He and Mahomes have been the best players in the entire NFL by far. It's like, he's been insane. I saw this numerical comparison with him and Kurt Warner on the 99 Rams. Like,
really? Like,
it was something about, like, no one has done this, this, and this since Kurt Warner in 99. Yeah. Now, the stats are so deep these days.
That's the highest praise.
Yeah. It's like Kurt Warner, that was the best season we've ever seen. And it's like someone had just said, well, if you look at the QBR and the passing, blah, 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 you know, we get deep in the weeds. But it was Tua and Kurt, and it's like, I don't know what the MVP odds were on Tua. It was like plus 10,000 or something, but like if you threw down on it, like congratulations. I love Jalen Hurts. He's been great. Jalen Hurts started a playoff game last year. Like, we saw him play a little more. Like, I even remember chatter about, like, is Tua even the best quarterback on the Dolphins? Like, Teddy Bridgewater's pretty good at football. So, like, he is the best quarterback on the Dolphins. He's been one of the 5, 3, 2, 1 best players in football.
That's going to do it for us here today. Thank you all so much for listening to the PhinsPod. Hope you enjoyed the show. Hopefully, you're finally believing in Tua Tagovailoa if you were a doubter. And if you weren't, well, I think we're all having a good time right now. Thank you again to Timothy Ritchie, Brian Guger, Chris, Commander Pig, and Dan Kolbasowski, members of the pod and supporters of the show over on Patreon. Check that out. Links in the description, or head to patreon.com/PhinsPod. Thank you guys so much for the continued support over there. Really means a lot. And remember to like the video to the rest of you who enjoyed the show. Subscribe just so you never miss a chance to chat about your Miami Dolphins. Remember that the PhinsPod's available on all platforms, so if you prefer audio over this video format on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, and of course, here on YouTube as well. Continue the conversation with us over on Twitter and Instagram at PhinsPod. I did buy the blue check mark. I don't want crap for it. I needed to pretend like I was legit. Let me have it. I hope you all have an amazing day, and until next time, stay safe. Love y'all.